The NBA Finals are almost here, and every play could be the one that changes everything. This is the NBA playoffs, where heroes rise, legacies are built, and the action never lets up. And with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA, you don't just watch the madness, you live it. Back your favorite team, ride with your clutch time killer, bet on the buzzer beaters, the breakout performances, the game-winning threes, from player props to same-game parlays. This is how you take your fandom to the next level. The New York Knicks, after beating the Celtics, are up to plus 360 as the second best odds to win the title. Surprisingly, the Pacers back at plus 600 because my initial thought on that series is I want to pick the Pacers. But some interesting championship odds right now. New to the game, no sweat. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll score $300 in bonus bets. It's that easy. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. That's code HOOPS, HOOPS, for new customers to get $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Thursday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week. Well, Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals looked very similar to Game 1, except for we didn't get the rough shooting performance from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in the first quarter. We got a few different defensive looks from Minnesota, neither of which I thought were the answer. And once again, down the stretch, Oklahoma City pulls away as Minnesota just gets frustrated and kind of lets go of the rope. And we are headed back to Minnesota with the Thunder up 2-0 in this series. We're going to be breaking down this game from the perspective of both teams. I'm going to talk about some potential adjustments. We're going to be talking a lot about SGA today and some of the specific ways that he's super effective as an on-ball scorer. Our Microsoft segment today, we're going to be covering Shai's MVP case. Lots of Shai talk today. And then at the tail end of the show, we'll take 10 to 15 minutes of mailbag questions from the chat. When we finish up here tonight, we're going to be heading over to Playback for our usual after show. That's where we take callers, we watch film, we have a much more informal, just have fun talking hoops type of experience. I've been having a blast with those shows. I hope you guys will come over and hang out with us. Again, that's playback.tv/hoops tonight right after we get done here on YouTube. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. It's also super helpful if you leave a rating and a review on that front. Jackson's doing great work on our social media feeds, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Make sure you guys follow us there. And then, like we mentioned earlier, keep dropping those mailbag questions in the YouTube comments so we can get to them at the tail end of the show from the chat. All right, let's talk some basketball. So I thought tonight was a classic example of how watching the box score is not the answer to who is playing better in any particular game. We had a question right after Game 1 where someone asked me why I wasn't more critical of Anthony Edwards scoring 0 points in the fourth quarter. And one of the things we've talked a lot about since that is the reality in the massive difference between the way these two teams are guarding each other. Ant was way more aggressive tonight. He had 32, 9, and 6. And he was a minus 22, and I didn't think he played particularly well. The reality is these two teams are guarding each other in diametrically opposed fashion. The Thunder are packing the paint, conceding corner kickouts, literally begging for Ant and Julius to try to force it into traffic so that they can be inefficient and turn the basketball over. On the other end of the floor, and the other part of it too is they're just trying to force Minnesota, their role players, to take mildly contested corner threes in high-pressure situations. On the other end of the floor, with the exception of a few sequences of zone, which we'll talk about in a little bit, which the Thunder scored fine against, and then kind of a haphazard, aggressive double-team approach against Shai in the fourth quarter, a lot of just staying home on shooters and just pressing up on Shai playing one-on-one against him, defending ball screens 2-on-2. The job for Shai in this series is to score the basketball. So what I'm looking for from Shai is scoring volume and efficiency. The job for Ant and Julius in this series is to get the ball out to their shooters on time, on target, in the shooting pocket, so that they can either make the defense pay knocking down the shot or drive a closeout and get the defense into rotation where they can attack from there. And Ant came out tonight, took 18 shots in the first half. And like there were some good looks in there. Some good three-point shots off the catch that I liked. Some that he made, some that he missed. Driving layup off of a Julius Randle post-up where he was one pass away, where he finished over the top of Chet, driving a closeout. There are shots in there that I like. There are even some on-ball one-on-one shots that I liked in there. But there were like 8 or 9 of those shots that I thought were bad shots. Early clock contested pull-up threes against a pick-and-roll coverage, or trying to knife through 6 different bodies in the paint, including his own teammates, to try to finish in traffic. I thought he forced the issue tonight, and Minnesota couldn't score. They didn't score over 25 points in a quarter until the fourth quarter. On the other end of the floor, Shai came out and consistently and efficiently worked out of ISOs and ball screens to make the Wolves pay for letting them play one-on-one and letting them play 2-on-2. So the question is, how is it that Shai continues to be so successful against a defense as good as Minnesota's? And it goes deeper than the game plan. Part of it is the game plan. By the way, Shai has torched Minnesota all year long. The first half of game 1 was the exception. He has torched these guys. Part of it is the game plan. Chris Finch historically has trusted his one-on-one defenders and wanted to stay home off the ball. That is very much a Chris Finch ideology. It's like the exact opposite of what you see from OKC or Memphis or some of these younger forward aggressive pack the paint types of teams. But it goes deeper than that. Minnesota has elite one-on-one defenders. Jaden McDaniels is theoretically the perfect type of player to guard a guy like Shai. A guy that he can't overpower, a guy that he's got longer arms, is taller, who moves his feet well, great at contesting pull-up jump shots. We even saw him block a Shai pull-up 3 tonight. Like, he's theoretically the perfect type of player to guard it. But Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was the best high-volume ISO player in the league this year for a reason. Out of the 5 players to run at least 300 ISOs, to take at least 300 shot attempts out of ISOs, his 1.10 points per possession ranked number 1 in the league. And it's a simple dynamic. He is the best driver of the basketball in the world, and he's one of the highest field goal percentage pull-up shooters in the world. That's the give and take with him. He logged 265 more drives than any other player in the NBA this year. In other words, 4 more per game than anyone in the NBA this year. And he's one of the highest field goal percentage pull-up shooters in the world. Out of the 13 players to take at least 500 pull-up jump shots this year, only DeMar DeRozan shot a higher field goal percentage than Shai. And Shai was more efficient because he took more threes. Shai shot 45% on pull-up jump shots, 1.06 points per shot. This puts every defender, even fantastic defenders like Jaden McDaniels, in a bind. You have to overreact to the drive, but at the same time, you have to overreact to the pull-up because he's so good at both. And this is where Shai's brilliance comes into the equation, because he's remarkably gifted at selling one or the other, changing pace, selling fakes. He has a ridiculous ability to chain together counter moves. I've never seen a player that can get into your body and cross over and get into your body and behind the back and get into your body and spin and just counter until you eventually give up that angle. And when you give up that angle, that's when he goes downhill on you. And if you concede space, he's one of the best over-the-top shooters in the league. One of the things he was doing tonight that I found really interesting, whether it was in ball screens or in ISO situations, he's snaking the help defender. You guys ever see this in ball screens where like A guy will come over the top of the screen and then he'll cross back over to the direction he originally came from. And the big man will have like no idea what to do as he kind of works back towards the middle. Shai will do that on drives. He'll hard drive. Someone will hard step over and help, and he'll just immediately cross back over into the middle. And now all of a sudden the help defender's got his body all shifted out of position and he's right at the front of the rim again. It's one of the biggest reasons why I think Minnesota absolutely must change their game plan. This whole situation gets exacerbated by Jaden McDaniels' ball pressure. I talked about this in game one. You guys saw it again on the last driving layup that he had down the right side of the lane tonight. When Jaden is picking him up 28 feet from the basket, that's just food for Shai. He's going right around him every single time. We did see some shift from Finch. We saw some zone. That didn't work. We'll talk about it in a minute. Again, they tried doubling in the fourth quarter a little bit more. I don't think those are the answers. I'll talk about it in a minute when we start talking about Minnesota's adjustments, but the weaknesses for OKC that have been on display this postseason is sometimes Shai will force the issue through multiple bodies when the defense is trying to force him to be a passer. He'll force it sometimes. And two, their catch and shoot guys can go deadly cold sometimes. In this defensive scheme, which takes away catch and shoot threes, lets Shai work one-on-one and pressures the ball, which allows him to drive to the basket, is literally playing directly into Oklahoma City's hands. Every playoff series is a chess match. And that chess match starts with your baseline scheme, usually a defensive scheme geared towards the matchup. For Chris Finch and the Wolves, it was geared towards exactly what they did in the regular season to everybody. It's their kind of like stock scheme that they use, right? And nothing is going to change for either team until you show an ability to beat that base scheme. You want to know why we saw zone out of Minnesota tonight? You want to know why we saw doubling? Because they're grasping at straws because Shai is killing them one-on-one. You want to know why OKC has more or less been doing the same thing on defense through the entire series to this point? It's because Ant keeps trying to force his way into traffic. Julius Randle forced his way right out of the game tonight. They are not showing the ability to dislodge Oklahoma City from their base scheme. Part of that is Minnesota's walked into this series with a certain amount of ego, thinking we have the best individual defenders in the league. Look what we did to Luka. Look what we did to LeBron. Look what we did to Austin. And, you know, obviously the dregs of the Golden State roster after Steph got hurt. But, like, they went in that series thinking they were going to be just fine. And again, like, what did I complain about in the Lakers series? What did I say consistently? Why did Minnesota win? Because LeBron couldn't score, because Luka couldn't score, because Austin couldn't score when they needed to score in the pivotal moments of the game. Shai continually has given these dudes buckets. They can't guard him one-on-one. And so here we are through two games, and as we head back to Minnesota, they've got to shift their base scheme. And we'll see what happens next. I'm going to talk some Minnesota adjustments in a minute. Oklahoma City beating the zone, I thought it really came down to two things. Their offensive rebounding. And again, this is a problem with zone in general. You're not matched up with individual offensive players. And so there's a tendency to give up cuts and crashes because you're just not matched up with guys, and you can give up offensive rebounds in that way. And then Alex Caruso and his ability to score in the middle of the floor. One of the things you'll see against the zone, especially when you've got a Chet Holmgren or an Isaiah Hartenstein that can be a vertical spacer underneath the basket, the big man will not want to come out to the middle of the floor. He won't want to come out to the middle because he'll give up that lob or that dunk. So with the top guys being concerned with the guys on the top, tracking the three-point line, corner guys the same thing, a lot of 2-3 zones will concede a catch there in the middle. And Caruso, over and over again, just kept catching the ball in the middle of the floor and scoring there as he was left open. And so the zone just didn't work for Minnesota to slow down Oklahoma City in this game. I thought J-Dub and Chet were both fantastic. Chet's been really effective in this series around the rim as a scorer since basically the second half of game one. And a big part of that is that same dynamic we were talking about earlier. Everything's like in ball screens, they're being defended 2-on-2. In the one-on-ones, when they're offering help, they're not like swarming. They're bringing one guy over, usually the big. In which case, when he steps over, Chet's finding opportunities as an offensive rebounder. Both Chet and J-Dub were deadly in transition in this game. I thought that was big. But to get to get 48 points from those two guys, that's one of the best supporting scoring games we've seen the Thunder get in this postseason. And then overall, just Oklahoma City's defense, which has been fantastic in this entire playoff run. They erased Julius Randle in this game. If you guys remember, I talked before the series about the specific thing that tilted me back towards Oklahoma City, even though my initial gut feeling was that Minnesota had advantage in this series. The big thing that tilted me back towards Oklahoma City was the specific dynamic you saw tonight, the inability to get the ball to Julius Randle in an advantageous scoring position. Oklahoma City went back to the exact same approach that they used against Denver, which was just fronting the post. And we saw multiple steals on plays where Julius tried to get the arm into the back and create that over-the-top passing angle. Pass comes in over the top, but there's ball pressure, so that pass is like a looping pass. And here comes Lou Dort shooting in on the back line to get that steal. I think it was Shai that got the other one, coming over and swiping away against the post front as he brackets from behind. Their defense has been fantastic in this series. The ball pressure, the rim contests. Shai has been causing some problems for Ant with like late contests at the rim. He forced a miss. He got a block on a late one where Ant got bailed out by an iffy foul call. There is a layered effect to this Oklahoma City defense that is having big time impact on Minnesota. Minnesota notes, couple things. The big thing is they need to change their defensive approach. I don't think the answer is zone. I don't think the answer is ball pressure. I don't think the answer is double teaming. I think the answer is you play defense the way Denver did. You have Jaden McDaniels sit in a passive defensive stance where he's meeting Shai closer to the elbows. We saw that when Jaden kind of gives space, he can close ground and get a great contest on a Shai pull-up three. Instead of pressuring Shai, he needs to be playing off, sitting back, making Shai drive into him, where he has more time to anticipate the driving angle and to beat him to spots, and it's more likely to bait Shai into pull-up jump shots. Then I do think they need to be using the Denver approach of gapping really hard, getting into the point where you've got four bodies in the paint consistently, and dare Shai and these guys to beat you in the half court as passers. When you double team Shai out at half court, it creates a 4-on-3 in a massive area of space. There's so much space to work with there. You guys have seen the Golden State Warriors annihilate teams for a decade using those 4-on-3s with that kind of space. When you double team, quote unquote, Shai in the form of more like 3-4 bodies in the paint consistently, that is a situation that creates the advantage for Oklahoma City on the perimeter. Make Shai relentlessly hunt kick-out reads. Make these dudes knock down contested jump shots. Now, one of the things is I did think it was defensible, even though I do think this series was inevitably careening towards a defensive shift, towards more what I'm talking about. I did think that it was defensible to try it again tonight. It was defensible because theoretically you kept game one close and you just missed a ton of kick out threes. So in theory, you go into game two, you stick with your base defensive game plan, guys shoot better, and you have a chance to go back home with a 1-1 series, and maybe you can hold that card in your back pocket. But now through two games, it's abundantly clear that these guys aren't going to be able to knock down enough of those kickouts in the corner against those contests. And so now it's at the point where you have to consider changing your defensive approach. You've got to get more stops than you've been getting. Oklahoma City, since the first half of game one, has consistently scored at high volume. 70 points in the second half of game one, 58 points in the first half of game two, 60 points in the second half of game two. They are scoring on you consistently for a game and a half now. You have to change that scheme. I also think it's defensible in the sense that it's hard to win on the road. And so throwing that, like game 3 is a must win now. You got to get that one. So I like the idea of going into game 3 and shifting your scheme in that game where you're also getting the benefit of role players being more comfortable, feeding off of the crowd, potentially Oklahoma City's role players getting less comfortable. That's where I think that could, especially with the scheme change, that could tilt things more heavily towards Minnesota. And so I think in game 3, there needs to be way less ball pressure, way more of a contain and compact the paint, force Shai to beat you with the pass, force Oklahoma City to beat you from the perimeter instead of letting them knife you to pieces in the middle of the lane like they have through the first 2 games. Another 58 points in the paint tonight for Oklahoma City. A couple other things. I talked about in game 1 how I would potentially consider leaning into Rudy Gobert more. No more of that. I thought Rudy was bad tonight. I thought he was bad on defense, and I thought he was nightmarishly bad on offense. He got 30 minutes tonight. I didn't think he was effective at any point. So I'm kind of over the Rudy Gobert experience in this series. The complete inability to finish anything in the pocket, and then on defense, like him not contesting Isaiah Hartenstein's floater down low, even though we got clear at film from the Denver series that's how you bother him. You're on a switch against Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or handling Shai in a drop coverage and you're just fouling him every time. He's not providing any real resistance. I don't see the Rudy value in this series anymore. So we talked about that as being a potential option to explore in game 1 or after game 1. You explored it more tonight. No more need to explore that territory. I don't think this is a series where Rudy can be very effective. Julius Randle has to change his approach. I thought he tried to force his way through a slump today. We talked a lot about this example in the last few weeks in our playback sessions, but the idea of like, how do you get yourself out of a slump when the shots aren't falling? There's option 1, which is take every shot you can get your eyes on. We saw a lot of that with like Dante DiVincenzo in game 1, for example. And in that sort of situation, you're most likely just going to compound the problem because you're probably going to be taking a bunch of iffy shots that are low percentage under any circumstances, especially when you're not in a good rhythm. The second method is find ways to generate easy shots and derive confidence from the dirty work, meaning defend your ass off, rebound your ass off, control everything that's in your control, which will help boost your confidence to where you feel better on the offensive end. And then on the offensive end, fight for easy looks, transition pushes, offensive rebound crashes, anything with the real advantage, whether it's a post mismatch or it's a semi-transition opportunity where you can drop your shoulder. There's a very brief stretch in the third quarter where Julius really started to force the issue physically. He got like a deep transition seal for a bucket, another like deep post up, and then a couple of like semi-transition pushes. And I'm like, hey, like this is better. But there was a huge stretch of the game where he was already 1 for 5, 1 for 6, and he's just taking every semi-contested 3 he can get his hands on. And like, that's just not going to get you out of that sort of slump. Again, this is where I'll move to the last adjustment here. Ant and Julius have to be looking to be aggressive with an advantage, not at the beginning of the possession. At the beginning of the possession, they're attacking a loaded up Oklahoma City defense that is praying to God that they will do something stupid like try to score through all of them in the paint. The on-ball guy, whether it's Julius or it's Ant or it's one of the role players, needs to be looking. And by the way, one of the things they're doing with the other role players is they're not overreacting as much on those pushes, or anything in the middle of the floor. But if Julius and Ant, whether it's through the post or it's through a pick and roll or an ISO or whatever it is, get the ball to the middle, get it sprayed out. From there, drive and kick spacing. Get out of the middle of the floor somewhere where you can get back in a position to catch. That guy will either catch and shoot and make a wide open catch and shoot 3, or against a closeout will drive. And now you have an opportunity to attack when the defense is shifted and sprinting at you. That is where Ant and Julius can look to be aggressive and score. This is not an on-ball scoring series for Ant and Julius. It is an on-ball playmaking and off-ball scoring series for Ant and Julius. They have to make that adjustment or they are never going to crack OKC out of their base scheme. All right, before we get to our mailbag questions, let's do our course correction segment on Shai's MVP. Welcome to Course Correction, brought to you by Microsoft. Just like star players and teams navigating performance hurdles, business decision makers today are under immense pressure to get things right. They must rise to the occasion, turning challenges into opportunities. Microsoft empowers these visionaries with AI solutions, simplified cloud and data management, and trustworthy, responsible AI. And when you're in the NBA, you have your own hurdles to face. In this segment, we will highlight the player every week that has risen to the occasion when his team needed him. Whatever challenge you're facing, Microsoft empowers you with the expertise to say, bring it on. This week's player of the week is the 2025 MVP of the NBA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Shai had a remarkable statistical season. 33 points per game, 5 rebounds, 6 assists, 1.7 steals and a block, 64% true shooting. But that's somehow underselling how important he was to the Oklahoma City offense. Per Cleaning the Glass, the Thunder offense was 9.1 points per 100 possessions better when he was on the floor versus off. The strength of the Thunder is their defense. We all know that. And their defense is elite down the roster, regardless of who is on the floor, including Shai. But they could not score with Shai off the floor this year. They had a 114.8 offensive rating with him off. For perspective, that's a lower offensive rating than the Houston Rockets logged this year in the regular season. But they had a 124 offensive rating when Shai was on the floor, which is 3 points better than the number one offense in the league, the Cleveland Cavaliers. We were talking about Nikola Jokic having the greatest offensive season of all time. They had a 126 offensive rating with Jokic on the floor. Shai was producing with that Thunder offense at nearly the same level. In other words, the Thunder offense went from mediocre to elite top-tier production when Shai was on the floor. There was, and this goes beyond the metrics to the eye test. There were so many times this year where Shai's entire supporting cast lost their confidence, and he had no choice but to completely take control of the game. He was also one of the most reliably great scorers in the league this year. Shai had just 9 games this season where he shot below 40% from the field. For comparison, a guy like Ant, 25 such games. Oh, well, Ant takes a lot of threes. Okay, how about Brunson? Brunson's a guy who lives in the mid-range. 21 times this year, Brunson shot below 40% from the field. How is it that Shai is so reliably good on the defensive end of the floor? Well, for starters, 2/3 of his shot attempts come within 17 feet. So there's very little variance because there's very little long-range jump shooting. And then on those short-range jumpers, which would be the one thing in there that has a lot of variance, he shot 54% on jumpers inside of 17 feet. So he was deadly on the one thing in his 2/3 of his game that occurs within 17 feet of the rim that would theoretically come with some variance. He also got to the rim an absurd amount. We talked about his drives earlier. 550 attempts at the rim this season, according to Synergy. For perspective, Nikola Jokic logged 553 attempts at the rim this season, only 3 more than Shai did. I thought he was very much deserving of the MVP. I'm a big Jokic fan, and I do think Jokic is a better basketball player than Shai is. But that's not the purpose of this award. It's a regular season award. And Shai was the best regular season player in the league this year. For by far the best team in the league, they finished 18 games ahead of Denver. I also thought Jokic let go of the rope defensively in the second half of the season, and that played directly into the problems they had down the stretch as they slid down the standings and had to fire their coach. I heard a lot of talk about Jokic having the greatest offensive season ever and us looking back this year and thinking that the MVP decision we made was a mistake. I don't see it that way at all. I think SGA's MVP case is beyond well-deserved. I don't think any player in the league had a reasonable case to be over him. So congratulations to Shai. Obviously, he just won the MVP. But at this point, I would be stunned if the Thunder didn't win the title. I think they match up extremely well with both Indiana and New York, two teams that rely on guard play and speed. And Oklahoma City's just got better speed and better guard play, while also being better defensively on the back line than both of those teams. I I think they would dispatch of both the Knicks and the Pacers in 5 games or less. And at this point, you're up 2-0 in the Western Conference Finals, and Minnesota hasn't even come remotely close to dislodging you from your base game plan. What does that tell me? That tells me this time a month from now, the Thunder are going to be hoisting the trophy, and Shai won't just be an MVP, he'll be a Finals MVP. And if you start to look at the Thunder and the assets they have at their disposal and the age of their roster and the fact that they still have so much room to improve, it might not even be the first one he gets. That's it for this week's course correction. Remember, Microsoft's AI solutions empower you to take bold steps and make informed decisions, sparking new ideas to help drive your business forward. With Microsoft as your trusted partner, you can navigate your journey with confidence, finding innovative solutions and reaching new possibilities. Visit Microsoft.com/challengers to learn more. All right, Jackson's going to come on stage and we're going to take 10, 15 minutes of questions. You're muted, Jackson.
Oh, my bad. First question, probably, and this person said probably a little bit early to ask this kind of question, but now that they're continuing to dominate, is this OKC defense one of the best ever? And if they win the title, will they be one of the best teams ever?
So you're never going to hear me talk about a basketball team being one of the best basketball teams ever until they win multiple championships. I'm consistent about this stuff. Here's a really simple way to put it. Boston had a similar year last year where they ran through the entire league, won 64 games, kicked everyone's ass in the postseason, never even felt remotely threatened. Like Oklahoma City showed some flaws against Denver and looked like threatened at one point in time. I told Boston fans at the time I didn't see them as an all-time great team because you kind of have to earn that right with me. And guys, like, I'm pretty consistent about this stuff. Like, it was the same thing with Jokic back in the day. Like, I think that there's a conversation you can have about who's the best at something, but I'm usually the guy that like wants to see you accomplish the ultimate goal first. I don't like theoretical success. I like real life success. And so for me, like, I think the Thunder have every possibility to be an all-time great team that wins multiple championships. And when they do, if they do, we will acknowledge them as such, but I don't like to jump the gun there. As far as the defense goes, and again, we got to see it survive like multiple seasons. So like say for instance, you beat Denver again next year, different Denver team, or you beat like a Spurs team that has Giannis and Wemby and De'Aaron Fox. Like, the idea of winning multiple championships involves 2 separate seasons where you beat 4 different teams in 4 different rounds that are very different types of teams. And so the defense side of it, I need to see that defense have that success through multiple playoff runs. That said, I absolutely see that upside, and I thought it manifested in them. That Denver offense was unbelievable all year. And for extended stretches, not only did they quote unquote dislodge or frustrate Denver's offense, they played Jokic into probably the worst 3-game stretch I've ever seen him play in game 2, 3, and 4. So, or was it 3, 4, and 5? I can't even remember. I think it was 2, 3, and 4. But like, yeah, like the defense certainly has that capability. The team overall certainly has that capability. I'm just not the guy to start throwing around the all-time great phrase until you win multiple championships.
Yeah, I think that's fair. They do look. It feels like they're at a different level defensively than the rest of the league, which I think is something that speaks volumes and is why these conversations are, at least, it's fair to at least start them, because even they haven't won even one title yet. They certainly haven't won 2, but it feels obvious on the eye test that they are a gap from the second best defense in the NBA, which feels like something we haven't talked about much other than like, 4 Pistons, which is not to say they're as good as that team defensively, but that gap is why I think these conversations are at least, reasonable at this point.
And to your point, like, you want to know why the Pistons are remembered that way? Not only did they beat Shaq and the Shaq and Kobe Lakers, but they made an additional run to the NBA Finals. And I can't remember exactly what it was, but they were in the Eastern Conference Finals something like 5 or 6 years in a row. Like, they were perennially playing in May and June. And so they resonated with us because of that. And that's the thing. Like guys, like, all you have to do is make yourself irrefutable. Like I know it sounds simple to say, but do it, and at a certain point, no one can say anything. Like it's like the Steph Curry thing. Everyone's, oh, Steph only won because of KD and injuries. Oh, Steph only won with KD and injuries. What happened then? He won without KD and without as much talent as the team he was going against. And now Steph is stamped forever. If you look at Steph and you don't see why he's good, I can't even talk basketball with you because it's unassailable what he did. This is the beginning of a potentially long journey that all they have to do is keep knocking teams out, and they're going to have that reputation of being one of the all-time great teams on both ends of the floor.
For sure. Another question about OKC. Why do you think this this was a super chat question, by the way. Thank you for the super chat. Why do you think this OKC team is so disliked when it feels like they're similar to sort of an early 2000s era basketball team? Basketball fans have said they wanted defense and driving the ball. They got it, and yet somehow they're still disliked. Thoughts?
Couple things. I think that when a team is kicking everyone's ass, they tend to become universally disliked. That Jackson, I'm sure you could speak to that as a fan of the Celtics over the
Yes.
years, and as someone who worked with Draymond and covered the Warriors very closely. Like no one likes getting their ass kicked. I
Certainly
think
not.
I think everyone sees the writing on the wall a little bit, which is like Oklahoma City will probably go into next season as like a pretty substantial favorite. Like probably somewhere in the like if you had if I would guess that OKC would enter next season at like almost even odds to win the
I
title.
would too, which is crazy.
Like and so like they're the best team that we've seen in terms of like overall two-way talent to the since the team that Kevin Durant and Steph Curry were on in that Warriors stretch there in the late 2010s, but they don't have some of the fragility that we saw with Boston, where it's like, well, Kristaps Porzingis can't stay healthy, and Al Horford is getting very old, and like J Dub, or excuse me, like Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum are both kind of like rickety stars that have the potential to like spiral in big moments. Like Shea is just a more reliably great star at the head of it, and they're younger and healthier and more athletic, and so it's easier to see more sustained success. And I think everyone is kind of experiencing a similar feel to what the Warriors looked like when Kevin Durant was on the team, where it's like, how the hell are we going to beat these guys, you know? And then I think the second part of it is like you and I were complaining about this before the show. Like Shea is so amazing, and so is Jalen Brunson. The two of them are so unbelievably good. And I like for some reason, when I see Shea go down in a pivotal third quarter run and unleash the low gather on Nickeil Alexander Walker and just drive through his chest and then throw up a left-handed floater that like literally no basketball player would ever take under any circumstances unless they were expressly looking for a foul. And he banks it in, and the crowd goes crazy, and it's like this big moment, right? Like it feels like Shea driving the nail in the coffin of game two, and it just kind of is like, ugh, but it's a non-basketball play. That's gross. And so I think there's a certain amount of that's kind of eating at people a little bit, but I would even say that's pales in comparison to the simple fact that everyone's just scared shitless that these guys are going to be impossible to beat for the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think that is so on point. And I think the fact that it feels like there's no other real contender combined with the fact that they have perfectly seemingly executed this like draft your stars and draft your role players thing. They kind of have done it the way that people want teams to do it. And yet nobody likes it because they're so unstoppable.
It's so funny.
Next question. J Dub has looked a lot better this series than he did last series. What do you think he has done differently? Has he done something differently, or is it sort of just making more shots?
It's the defensive scheme. Like
Hmm.
both Shea and J Dub looked bad in the second round, except for crunch time, because of the fact that the two of them kept trying to force it through Denver's defense and take stupid ass shots. Like Minnesota is letting these dudes play one on one, and both of them look way more comfortable as a result. And like that really to me is like exactly what makes Minnesota's game plan so dumb. The entire purpose of a defensive game plan in the postseason is to make your opponent uncomfortable, and they have allowed Shea and J Dub and even Chet to get comfortable because they're playing in a setting that kind of fits their skill set perfectly.
Yeah. We'll do a couple more questions, then go over to playback. Hey Jason, Minnesota seemed to spark a comeback with Rudy and Julius off the floor in the fourth quarter. Is that type of lineup specifically, or just in general, small ball, something you think they can be successful with going forward?
A couple things. I think that they need to go without Gobert anyway. I think that was pretty clear. You don't bail on Julius for the series. I thought it made sense to bail on him tonight because he was just out of it. But Julius, they're not winning this series unless Julius plays better. But like I also thought there was like a classic example of like a little bit of a relenting of the intensity from Oklahoma City. I thought Ant got like two or three kind of questionable whistles on plays where he didn't really get fouled, but he was just driving through four bodies and it's almost like a sympathy whistle. There was like just a level of like kind of downhill desperation verve that Minnesota was playing with that Oklahoma City wasn't matching. Like I thought most of what happened at the end of that game was like kind of classic fake comeback stuff. Really quickly, just so you guys have some numbers, the zone possessions, Oklahoma City 15 possessions of zone, 1.13 points per possession. So they were successful against it all night long. Minnesota 21 unguarded catch and shoot shots in this game, and they only got 0.86 points per shot. And like, really, that's kind of the main thing. And like, if there's one defense to throw at Ant for him just trying to ram his head through a brick wall tonight,
Yeah,
it's that his teammates are all shit in the bed. Because
yeah,
like there's a certain amount of like none of them can score in these advantages that Oklahoma City is gift wrapping for them, and at a certain point, I think he's just looking at the situation and going, "Well, never mind, I'll do it myself." You know.
yeah. Nikhil finally hit some shots, but when Julius Randle and Naz Reid are combined two for a million, it's like, what are you supposed to do?
Exactly. Exactly.
Uh, Last question before playback. Hi, Jason. Big fan of the show. What do you think has caused so many stars getting injured in this playoffs? And is there anything to do to prevent it?
Yes, there is something to do to prevent it. I think that this has been pretty clear for a half decade now, which is that the hunt for additional possessions through higher paced play, the drive and kick spacing, the 4 out 1 in relocating spacing with like lots of super hard closeouts and covering ground in transition. There's no doubt that the style of play is infinitely harder on the lower body than what the 80s and 90s looked like, or even the 2000s, right? And so I think that the NBA has a problem that they have to look to address, which is that in multiple consecutive postseasons now, we're not just seeing like a couple stars get hurt. Like it's happening to three, four, five guys in every single postseason run. Torn Achilles, torn ACLs, foot injuries. Like there's just a clear sign that the modern NBA game is more taxing on the body than it used to be. I think that there's a very simple solution, which is to shorten the season. You cut it down to 66 games. You play at most 3 times a week. Every team has a guaranteed 2 day off stretch every single week. You space out the games in a way that one benefits you financially in the form of stars participating more frequently in higher urgency, because if you shrink the season by 20%, you increase the value of each regular season win by 20%, right? That's just a theoretical, just 20% increase in urgency every single night. And then I think you give the body a chance to recover from what is a grueling game. And then I would do it in the postseason as well. Like there's just so many games, it's so easy to protract it. There's no reason at all why you can't play every third night in the postseason, especially if you shorten the season. You could start playing in October, play 66 games, never have a back to back, have that bit of time off, and then you could be in a situation in the postseason where guys aren't being forced to play every other night and traveling from city to city. I think the NBA's got to have a real honest conversation with themselves about whether or not the money is worth the wear and tear they're putting on these guys' bodies, because I think the modern game is just too much for them. All right, guys, that is all we have for tonight. As always, we sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting us and supporting the show. Playback.tv/hoops tonight is where we're going for the after show. I'll see you guys there.